48. The Paradise of Women. Chalcedon Position Paper number 98, June 1988. Slander shifts its ground readily, because it is concerned with what will hurt rather than what is true. In different eras, different charges hurt the most. What in one period may be a hurtful accusation may become a compliment in another day. This was certainly true of Calvin and of Geneva in Calvin's day and in his time of influence. As Gillian Lewis and Roger Stauffenegger have pointed out, Calvin's Geneva came to be known as the Paradise of Women. Calvinism in Geneva in the time of Calvin and of Beza, 1545 to 1605. In Mena Presswich, editor, International Calvinism, 1541 to 1715, Oxford, England, Clarendon Press, 1985-1986, page 49. There were good reasons for this. Calvin was strongly protective of women's rights. Under his guidance, church consistories went after wife abusers. They prosecuted guardians who had misappropriated trust funds of widows and orphans. Deserted wives were protected, and so on. Presswich has referred to the attraction of Calvinism for women in that area. Calvinism in France, 1555 to 1629, Ibid, page 96. In that era, and for centuries before, powerful and prosperous elderly men and women contracted marriages with very young women and men. The families of the young complied with these arrangements for their personal advantages. Calvin felt strongly that such marriages should not be allowed. In January 1557, the consistory dissolved a marriage between a woman of more than 70 with a man of 27 or 28. Philip E. Hughes, editor, the Register of the Company of Pastors of Geneva in the time of Calvin, Grand Rapids, Michigan, William B. Eerdmans, 1966, page 321. Rules were published to protect both men and women in marriage. To avoid deception, many rules were established. Thus, strangers coming from a distant country could not be permitted to marry in Geneva until a careful investigation of their past and their family were made. Hughes, page 75. A woman persecuted for her faith could legitimately leave her husband. Hughes, page 197. It would be an error to say that the pastors of Geneva were always wise in their judgments in cases involving women. What is clear is that Calvinist Geneva was seen in its day as the paradise of women because of the receptivity of Calvin and others to their plight and their need for justice. There was a reason for this attitude. It was the revival of the Old Testament as an inseparable part of the Bible. The New Testament was read as an essential part of the Old Testament. Because the Old Testament solidly links holiness with the law, and the law is concerned with everyday life, the result was what Henri Ozer called the secularization of holiness. That is, holiness was made a matter of everyday life for all believers. Holiness now was the pursuit of all Christians. It was, in Luthy's words, an insistence on saintly life as the duty of every believer. Herbert Luthi, Variations on a Theme by Max Weber, in Presswich, page 381. Calvin said of Luke chapter 6, verse 35, "But love ye your enemies, and do good, and lend, hoping for nothing again, and your reward shall be great, and ye shall be the children of the highest, for he is kind unto the unthankful and the evil. That is our duty to do good, expecting nothing. We are to exercise a royal goodness, not a mercenary one. Having received grace, we should then manifest grace. Calvin, Commentary on a Harmony of the Evangelists, Matthew, Mark, and Luke, Volume 1, pages 302 and 303. We have a remarkable fact here in Calvin's Reformation of Geneva. It was a city rightly called in its day the Paradise of Women. This is an aspect of the Reformation which has been given insufficient attention. The reason is that these reforms in civil and church law, which made Geneva so remarkable in its day, are now associated with patriarchalism, and patriarchy is a hated word to the feminists in both skirts and trousers. It suggests visions of male oppression, domination, and rule. It has become a symbol of past and present evils. The significant fact, however, is that patriarchalism was not male-centered, but faith and family-governed. Modern men in the atomistic family often have more power, if they choose to exercise it, than did patriarchal men. The reason was a very clear one. Patriarchal man was a trustee from the past to the future. In 1 Kings chapter 21, we see that Naboth did not feel that he had the right to sell the family land, no matter how much money King Ahab offered. The land was not his, except as a trust from his forefathers to the generations yet unborn. The appeal of existential living is that it limits all right and power to the present moment. Existential man sees no responsibility to the past, nor to the future, nor to anything in the moment other than his will and desire. This is why, given any opportunity, existential man is always tyrannical and oppressive. He will do what he can safely do without incurring immediate judgment. Both power and quote-unquote right are limited to the moment and to his will. Not so with patriarchal man. He is linked to responsibilities, to the family, and to other people. His wife is his partner and vicegerent in responsibilities, and both must be future-oriented. Feminism, like masculinism, is existentialist and present-oriented. It has no sense of community, nor of the harmony of interests. Both feminists and masculinists believe in a war of the sexes, and are out to win in that war. As good Darwinians, they believe in the survival of the fittest in a cosmic war for survival. Since the universe has no law nor morality in their faith, the fittest are simply the survivors, those whose radical ruthlessness and contempt for morality enables them to survive. To all such people, patriarchy is a trap, because it presupposes, despite the fallen man's depravity, the ultimacy and triumph of God and His law. The universe is thus a moral universe. As Deborah declares in her song, "The stars in their courses fought against Sisera." Judges chapter 5, verse 20. A biblical, patriarchal culture sees the essential conflict in life as a moral conflict, not a personal one. As a student, I heard a professor, who not in favour of patriarchalism, call its central characteristic hospitality and openness to people. He cited as revelatory of patriarchalism Abraham's response to the three strangers. He invited them in to share his salt or life. Genesis chapter 18. Modern social atomism, however, sees all men as enemies and turns the world into a hostile place. Class is set against class, and race against race. Woodrow Wilson, as a student at Princeton, shared in the hatred of students for town boys called snobs at Princeton and wrote, "We will have to kill some of those snobs yet before they will learn prudence." Jonathan Daniels, Woodrow Wilson's Pius Young, New Republic, October the 29th, 1966, page 28. Wilson, of course, had no such murderous plan, but he liked to think in such terms. Not surprisingly, he helped advance the cause of class conflict. Even as he dreamed of a one world made safe for democracy, he advanced social divisions by his thinking. Biblical, patriarchal culture is now very much despised by those who, as humanists, hate moral solutions. For them, our problems are not to be diagnosed as a rebellion against Christ and God's law, but as a matter of economic conflicts, class tensions, and sociological conditionings of a regressive and sociopathic nature. Calvin is, for them, a symbol of bad answers. And a recent book sees Calvin as essentially a quote-unquote sick man. The book tells us more about the author than Calvin. I have on occasion cited, in speaking, the work of the Bishop St. Charles Borromeo, whose charities included giving marriage dowries to penniless girls whose fate would otherwise have been the streets, and, in addition to the hostel for the street people of his day, orphanages, a home for reformed prostitutes, and a home for unhappily married women. Margaret Yeo, Reformer, St. Charles Borromeo, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Bruce, 1938, pages 115, 228 to 229. The reaction is sometimes a cold one. Quote, social, end quote, problems, many hold, should be dealt with by the state, not by, quote, amateurs, end quote. When we depersonalize the problems of men and women, we also depersonalize ourselves. We reduce people to mathematical ciphers whose answers lie in acts of Congress or Parliament. We deny Christianity and Christ in favor of the state and its social workers. Borromeo in Milan and Calvin in Geneva gave us another answer. But for many today, Geneva could not have been the paradise of women. After all, Geneva had no Equal Rights Amendment or law. Paul tells us, however, where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is liberty. 2 Corinthians chapter 3, verse 17. And it is the Spirit who gave us the law and the Gospels. If we do not seek our answers in the Lord and His Word, we are a part of the problem.